For so many of us, prayer can feel like, well, a performance, or maybe a one-way broadcast. We talk, we list our needs, and then we sign off. But what if it was always meant to be a conversation? Today, we're going to demystify an ancient Christian practice called Lectio Divina. It's a time-tested way to move from a monologue to a genuine back-and-forth dialogue with God. So let's just start with that core question right there. Does your prayer life feel like you're talking to God or with God? It seems like a small difference in wording, but the distinction is absolutely massive. One is about broadcasting your needs, the other is about connection. It's the difference between leaving a voicemail and waiting for a reply because you know for a fact that someone is on the other end of the line. And this just lays it out perfectly. It is so easy to fall into treating prayer like a divine suggestion box, or maybe like a drive-through window where we place our order and then just move on with our day. But if you think about someone like Abraham in the book of Genesis, he didn't just passively accept God's plan. No way. He engaged, he questioned, he pushed back. It was a real back and forth. That is a dialogue. That's a two-way relationship, not just a transaction. And here's the crazy paradox that I think a lot of us can relate to. You can be incredibly busy for God, serving, volunteering, leading things, and at the same time feel totally burned out and disconnected from Him. That spiritual exhaustion is what happens when our activity for God starts to replace our actual connection with God. And the scary part is, it's such a slow drift that you often don't even notice it's happening until you just feel empty. So, how do we fix this? How do we get back on track? Well, the whole solution starts with a huge mindset shift in how we approach the Bible itself. It's all about moving from seeing Scripture as just a book of information to seeing it as a place for a personal encounter. I absolutely love this analogy. Think about it. You can study a bird, right? You can examine its anatomy, its bone structure, every single feather. That's gaining information with your intellect. But that is a completely different thing from the experience of letting that bird fly, of actually seeing it come alive. Lectio Divina isn't about dissecting Scripture like a textbook. It's about letting the words take flight and speak to you personally. And that brings us right to the practice itself, Lectio Divina, which is just Latin for divine reading. And look, this isn't some new spiritual trend. This is an ancient, structured way of engaging with Scripture that saints and monks have used for centuries to build that real, conversational relationship with God. Now, don't let the Latin name fool you. The practice itself is nowhere near as complicated as it sounds. It's actually a pretty simple four-step path that's designed to guide us into that deeper conversation. So let's break it down. Okay, so here they are. First, you have lectio, which simply means read. Then meditatio, which is to reflect or meditate on what you've just read. Third is oratio, where you respond from your heart. And finally, contemplatio, which is simply to rest in God's presence. See, it's a really natural flow. You move from listening to thinking to speaking, and then finally to just being. Okay, let's start with that first step, lectio, or reading. The single biggest roadblock, especially when we're reading a story we think we know, is that little thought that pops into our head, oh yeah, I've heard this story before. That simple assumption can shut the whole conversation down before it even begins. True reading requires a little humility, a belief that, you know what, maybe there's something new for me to discover here. And check this out. This is a perfect example. We all tend to kind of lump the parables of the talents and the mina together like they're the same story. But if you slow down and really look, they're totally different. In Matthew, the servants get different amounts, and the best return is 100% gain. But in Luke, everyone gets the same amount, and the best servant pulls off a staggering 1,000% return. These are not the same story. That slow, careful reading reveals a completely different message about risk and reward. So the second step is meditatio, or reflection. As you're reading slowly, a single word or a phrase might just seem to shimmer or stand out to you. The ancient mystics described it like walking through a garden and one particular flower just catches your eye. The goal then is to chew on that word, to turn it over and over in your mind and ask, okay, why this word? Why is this hitting me today? What is God trying to show me right now? And that reflection, that chewing on the word, it naturally leads you to step 3, oratio, or response. This is where the dialogue really kicks off from your side of the conversation. And this isn't a formal, scripted prayer. It's just the spontaneous, honest reaction of your heart. You might feel a sudden rush of gratitude, or maybe you feel a need to confess something. You might want to ask a really direct question. Whatever it is, The key is just authenticity, bringing your real, unfiltered self into the conversation. And finally, we get to the fourth and, let's be honest, often the most challenging step, contemplatio, or simply to rest. It's a practice that's grounded in this super familiar verse. After you've listened through reading and you've spoken from your heart, the goal is just to be still and be present with God, moving beyond words altogether. And this right here, this just clarifies the goal so perfectly. Most of our prayer life gets stuck in phase 1. I speak, God listens. Lectio Divina is what gets us into phase 2. God speaks, I listen. But contemplation, that's phase 3. We are silent together. And it's not an empty silence, it's a shared mutual presence. It's kind of like two best friends who can just sit in a room together in total silence and feel completely comfortable and connected. That's the peak of conversational intimacy. But this powerful practice of being present with God doesn't just change us spiritually. It has a profound and even scientifically recognized impact on our minds. It's literally about building what the Bible calls a transformed mind. Neuroscientists have this great saying, neurons that fire together, wire together. What that means, in simple terms, is that whatever you repeat, your thoughts, your words, your actions, your brain physically rewires itself to make that pathway stronger, faster, more automatic. You are literally building mental highways inside your head. So here's the crucial point. When you consistently practice something like Lectio Divina, you're not just chasing an emotional high for a few minutes. You are actively building new neural pathways. You're retraining your brain's default setting so that when life gets stressful and pressure hits, your automatic go-to response isn't anxiety or fear, but the truth you've been rehearsing over and over again. And a rewired mind that is deeply connected to its source, well, it produces real, tangible results. The Bible calls these the fruit of the Spirit. And you'll notice, these aren't things you can just force yourself to have through sheer willpower. They are the natural, inevitable outcome of a life that stays connected to the vine. This practice doesn't just change your inner world, it changes how you actually show up in the real world. Okay, so this all might sound great, but the big question is, where do you even start? Let's make this incredibly practical. Here is a simple challenge to help you begin the conversation, like today. Seriously, forget trying to master all 4 of those Latin steps at once. Just commit to this 15-minute challenge. Start with 2 minutes of silence, just to quiet your mind and be present. Then spend 8 minutes reading a short passage, slowly, just looking for that one flower that stands out. And then 5 minutes to respond honestly, either by speaking out loud or just writing it down in a journal. That's it. It's a super simple rhythm to start building that habit of reconnection. At the end of the day, prayer was never meant to be a monologue. It was designed from the very beginning as an invitation into a real relationship. So the only question left is the one right there on your screen. If you actually create the space to listen, what conversation is waiting for you?